All right, guys, let's talk about mean absolute deviation. Okay. Mean absolute deviation, we talked about in class today, is the measure of the average distance between each value and the mean. So we're talking about, on average, how far apart is each data point from that measure of center, the average. Okay. So why do we calculate this? What does this tell us about the data set? Well, if the mean absolute deviation tells us about the differences in data, okay? It tells us either there's a lot of variation or maybe there's a little bit of variation, okay? So if there's a high mean absolute deviation, if the number is high, that means the data points are far away from each other. Lots of variation. If the mean absolute deviation is low, that means they're all really close together and it doesn't have a lot of variation. It doesn't have a lot of differences. Okay, so how to calculate it? First step is to find the mean of the data set. So mean absolute deviation, the first word is mean. Therefore, we need to find the mean of the data set. Okay. Then we're going to find the distance between each data point and the mean. And last, we're going to find the average of those distance. So we talked today in class about how we're going to use the mean absolute deviation chart to help us. So if you haven't already, and just here in a second, I'm going to put it on the screen. We're going to draw a mean absolute deviation chart to help us organize all of those steps. Okay, so here is the practice example that we just worked on, and it says Alex practiced playing the piano each day last week, and the number of minutes that he practiced each day is shown in the table. Find the mean absolute deviation. Okay, so here's Alex's piano practicing times. So that's our data set. And so first things first is we're going to make our mean absolute deviation table. Okay, so go ahead, and if you haven't already, draw this with me now. In the first column of our mean absolute deviation table, we're going to list our data points, okay? Then we're going to calculate the mean. In the next column, we have the differences. And then in our last column is where we're going to list all of the positive values, okay? So over here, back to our data, first thing we're going to do is list our data, okay? On the first day, he spent 55 minutes. Then there was 20 minutes, 25 minutes, 45 minutes, 50 minutes, 20 minutes, and 30 minutes. Okay, so we're going to list out our pieces of data. Then what we're going to do is we're going to calculate the average of all the time he spent. Okay, so to remember, to calculate the average, we're going to add them all together and then divide by how many there are. Okay, so we're going to add all these together and then we're going to divide them by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days. Okay, add them all up and divide by 7. When we do that, we get that the average or the mean time he spent practicing was 35 minutes. So since the mean is going to be the same for the entire data set, I'm just going to put it there at the top and draw me an arrow down to remind myself that the mean is the same for the entire data set. Okay. Now, in our third column, we talked about differences, and difference means the math operation to subtract. So we're going to just subtract straight across the column. So we do 55 minus 35 and we get 20. Okay. Now the positive value of 20 is just 20. So we're going to leave it alone, put it over there in that other column. Okay. Now we're going to keep working across the table. 20 minus 35 is a negative 15. The positive value of negative 15 is positive 15. 25 minus 35 gives us a negative 10. The positive value of negative 10 is positive 10. 45 minus 35 is 10. The positive value of 10 is 10. 50 minus 35 is 15. Positive value of 15 is 15. 20 minus 35, negative 15. The positive value of negative 15 is positive 15. 30 minus 35 gives us a negative 5. Our positive value is a positive 5. Okay, so we've got our entire table filled out, but we still got 3 things we need to figure out. We need to figure out what is the average of this column. Okay, these were our distances away from the mean, and if we want the average distance, we're just going to find the average of this data set. Okay, same way we found any other average before, we're going to find the sum. Okay, so that just means we're going to add up this column. 20 plus 15 plus 10 plus 10 plus 15 plus 15 plus 5, we get 90. okay? And then our count is just how many pieces of data do we have. So we already said we have 7 pieces of data, okay? So to get the average distance, we're going to take 90 divided by 7 and get a mean absolute deviation of 12.9. Now, if you are working along in your calculator, you'll see that it was 12 point something, 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 something. Well, we're just going to round to the tens place, okay? And that gives us a mean absolute deviation of 12.9. So you're going to use this type of chart for every mean absolute deviation problem we ever do, okay? In the first column, list your data, find the mean, calculate the differences, find the positive values, and then you're going to find the average of your positive values.